So I think we have understood that exercise, that we have very solid evidence that this is something important to do and that even yoga can be beneficial. But how to get this into practice? How do we change lifestyle and how do we maintain these changed lifestyles? And because of this, I'm really happy that we have as our next speaker, Professor Urte Scholz. Urte Scholz is Professor of Applied Social and Health Psychology at the Department of Psychology at the University of Zurich. And she's one really of the leading experts when it comes to lifestyle changes and the evidence behind. So I'm really looking forward to your presentation, Urte.
Thank you very much, and thank you also very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be part of this exciting symposium. And actually, I will really my talk quite relates to the two talks before. So I think this is really a very nice composition. Actually, when we talk about promoting lifestyle change, health behavior change, and maintaining it, I would like to start with a very basic question. Why do we need to bother about lifestyle change, health behavior? And actually, you already heard why we need to bother, but I'd like to give you another example that Katrin de Bock already mentioned, and this is the example of overweight and obesity. And indeed, the example of Switzerland says that here as well, 41% of the adult population is overweight and or obese. And actually, we're doing quite good with regards to international comparisons because, for example, in the US, as you already heard, over 30% of the adult population is obese already. So it's only 10% in Switzerland, but 41% overweight and increasing tendencies. So why is this related to health behavior change or health behavior? And you already heard this to diet and exercise. It's dramatically related, and the consequences are also quite dramatic because overweight and obesity are connected to increased morbidity and mortality and also to high costs regarding the healthcare system and the individuals, of course. I mean, it's also really has a lot of individual costs, and you can think of costs as a broad concept, for example, also stigmatization and all that. The development, and here comes the health behavior into play, is of course multifactorial, but behavior really plays a key role. So diet, exercise, and are the main behaviors or the key behaviors that really might cause the development of overweight and obesity. And as a consequence, actually, treatment always involves behavior change. So even if patients undergo surgery to reduce their obesity, they need to change their behavior. And this is really difficult, as you may know from yourself if you try to change your own health behavior. It's a challenge. So how do we do this? How do we promote health-relevant behavior? Any guesses? What would you do? What would you recommend? Or do you think of any prominent examples? Start today, yeah. No, do not procrastinate. Right. That's a very good suggestion. Yes? Get rewards from your health insurance, yes. Have benefits connected to the change in your behaviors. Yes, thank you. Scare people. Okay, thank you. Yes, actually, this is a very prominent method, and this is also what I brought you here. I mean, you see, this is really prominent, right? Fear appeal, scare people. Smoking is killing you. But I also found this, which I like very much. So eating large quantities of chocolate cigarettes may cause nausea, or it may actually also cause temporary happiness. So this is also not very scary, but might also be a risk communication involved. So this is what mass communication is about sometimes when politics try to convince people to change their behavior. And the effectiveness, it's not that it's totally ineffective. It's a little bit effective, but we really can do better. So we should go beyond risk communication when we try to promote health behavior, any kind of health behavior actually. And from health psychology, we do have a lot of theories, and we know since the 1960s that risk communication alone is not very effective. So the models that emerged in health psychology, the theories that we had in starting in the 1970s, 1980s, they went beyond this risk communication. They still include it in a way, but there's a little bit more than risk communication. For example, self-efficacy. It's a very prominent construct in psychology, meaning that you need to believe that you can do it today, maybe. So not only in 3 years or so, but you need to believe that you can do it. That self-efficacy is a very prominent construct. And outcome expectancies, this is exactly the benefits. You need to see some benefits of the new behavior. And the idea is that all these different constructs lead up to the formation of an intention. So you also need to have an intention to change their behavior, to start today. But the problem with these traditional models of health behavior change is that they think intention is it. So who of you has a good intention to change a behavior? Okay, quite a lot. And who of you successfully acts upon this intention? Okay, these are less. Okay, yeah, so that's actually a phenomenon which is known in the literature in health psychology also for quite some time. It's called the intention behavior gap. So we have a lot of good intentions, but it's not a logic consequence that we also act upon these intentions. So one model that we are working with in my group is a model that tries to not only promote the motivational part, so the intention formation part, but also the translation of this intention into behavior. And here we have, as you see, the same structure, but we add some more constructs where we can intervene on in order to promote really the health behavior change. And the model is called the health action process approach. So what about these components here? You see planning, you see action control. It's all psychological jargon. But I will explain what this means, and actually it's really simple. So that's the nice thing about psychology. We do simple things. Action planning, or it's also known as under the name of implementation intentions, really means that you plan exactly when, where, and how you will act. So in contrast to a goal intention, you have the intention, for example, to lose weight, to do more exercise, to stop eating a lot of chocolate. Here with this planning, with this action planning, you really make a detailed plan when, where, and how you will act. And we also have meta-analytic evidence that this strategy is effective in a lot of, or a broad area of behaviors. But here in the health domain, you see that that's the effect size. So we really have a moderate to large effect of this planning. So it seems to be effective to not only have an intention, but because most of these studies really compare people who have a goal intention with people who have a goal intention plus these action planning. And you see that it seems to be effective in terms of different health behaviors that you really are more likely to act upon your intentions if you do the planning, when, where, and how you will do so. There's another planning component that you saw in the model before, and this is that it's not only about planning when, where, and how to do something, but maybe you should also anticipate what barriers can emerge and how you want to cope with these barriers. So, for example, That's called coping planning. You anticipate that you will only go running when the weather is fine, and your barrier is it's raining heavily. Then you prepare before it's starting to rain your coping strategy, and this might be that you plan, if it's raining, I go swimming instead in order to act upon my intention to be physically active. And then the mental simulation of the successful scenario, this is also recommended for the action planning. So you really need to think of yourself doing this. This will strengthen the effect of your planning. There's also some evidence on this coping planning, that it's beneficial if you not only do action planning but also coping planning. Really think about what can stand in the way of acting upon your intention and planning how to overcome this. And in fact, the combination of action and coping planning, so not only when, where, and how, but also this overcoming barriers planning, seems to be most effective. And then you saw that there was a third construct helping us to overcome the intention-behavior gap, which is called action control. And action control is a construct which contains three subfacets. One is the awareness of your own standards. So you need to be aware of what you really intended to do. And actually, I mean, this sounds a bit strange, because you might think of someone that if he or she wants really to change her or his behavior, then this person should know what she wanted to do or he wanted to do. But a very nice anecdotal example, and that was a friend of mine. She wanted to change her diet. So she wanted to stop eating Cremeschnitten. Cremeschnitten is a very prominent cake, sort of cake. She was sort of addicted, and she was getting annoyed by this. So she wanted to get rid of her habit to eat Cremeschnitten all the time. And actually, it happens that she went to a bakery, bought a Cremeschnitte, went out of this bakery, took a deep bite into her Cremeschnitte, and only in this moment she remembered that she wanted to stop eating Cremeschnitte. So the awareness of the own standard is really not trivial, because, I mean, we are doing a lot of things all the time, and maybe sometimes you just forget that you wanted to get out of the bus 2 stops earlier because you wanted to walk, or stop eating Cremeschnitten or anything like that. So we really need to know what you intend to change in terms of your health behavior. So this is the first component of this action control. Then you also need to monitor your own behavior in order to know what you're really doing. And this is the self-monitoring component. And in case you find a discrepancy between your intended behavior and your actual behavior, you need to invest some effort to overcome this discrepancy. For example, do some planning, or to do some better planning. And I'd like to show you one randomized controlled trial that we run with all these 3 components. With cardiac rehabilitation patients, the target behavior was physical activity. We recruited all patients in the cardiac rehabilitation clinic. It was an inpatient clinic. And we randomly assigned them to the intervention group and the control group. 2 months and 12 months after discharge, we asked them again about their physical activity by self-report. That's what I have to admit. The intervention group received a face-to-face planning intervention in the clinic with a trained interviewer. So it was it contained up to 3 action plans on their physical activity after discharge, and up to 3 coping plans of their physical activity after discharge. And right after discharge from the clinic, they also received weekly diaries. So for 6 weeks, we feedbacked them their plans that they generated in this planning intervention and asked them in these weekly diaries whether they really did what they planned. So having the planned feedback is also targets the awareness of the intention. By asking whether they really did what they planned, we targeted the self-monitoring. And we were also suggesting that they, for example, could adapt their plans in case they weren't successful in being physically active. So this targets this third component of regulatory effort. The outcome was physical activity, as I said, 12 months later, and the results is what you see here. So we compared the intervention group and the control group, and on the self-reported physical activity after 12 months, we controlled for physical activity and intentions. They all had very high intentions to become physically active before at baseline. And you see that we indeed found a significant effect. So the intervention group was better in increasing their physical activity than the control group after 12 months. We were also interested on why this happened. So whether it was the action planning component, the coping planning component, or maybe the action control. And we indeed found that it was mediated by action control. So we could demonstrate that the formerly significant direct effect was reduced to a non-significant level after introducing action control to this model. So it means that indeed having action control increased together with the planning. I mean, this was all the combination, but the self-reported action control after 2 months, this seems to be the active ingredient of this intervention, which was related to maintenance in physical activity in the intervention group 12 months later. So promoting health behavior change should include going beyond intentions. So not only going beyond risk communication, but also going beyond intentions and adding post-intentional factors like action planning, coping planning, and action control. And in general, actually, we're doing not so bad. So really theory-based health behavior change randomized controlled trials have moderate effects. However, when it comes to maintenance of behavior change, we can do better. So there's mixed effects on long-term maintenance. And this is, of course, the ultimate goal. I mean, we saw that there's data that it's good to be physically active at one point in your life, but it should have stronger health effects if you really maintain a certain physical activity level across your whole lifespan, for example. So maintenance matters, which is also very nice what you heard from the yoga. So maintaining yoga is better than stopping after the intervention. However, when it comes to maintenance, we really have rather limited evidence. And the results of existing studies are rather mixed. So we're not doing so very good in the maintenance area of behavior change. We do have a lot of theories. So there's a recent systematic review of theories on maintenance of health behaviors. And this systematic review combined all these different theories on maintenance of behavior change and suggest or extracted 5 main themes, which you see here: habit, resources, maintenance, motives, self-regulation, and environmental and social influences. And you can further categorize these into individual factors and social factors or environmental factors. Resources is something like self-efficacy. So again, self-efficacy might be really important. Self-regulation might be something like planning, action planning, coping planning, but also action control. So this is also what you saw in these individually focused self-regulation models, or in this one model that I demonstrated. Maintenance motives means that it's not only important to think about that you should, for example, have a temporary diet, and this would be really wonderful if you'd be slim for the next summer season. But you should also have the motive of really maintaining your behavior for a longer time. So these are the individual factors, but equally important, I'd say, are the environmental and social factors. And we already heard that, for example, urban planning as an environmental factor might be really important, but social factors are also really important, as I argue, and I'd like to talk more about this in the remainder of my talk, because health behaviors usually really happen in social context. So maybe even sleeping, as you see here, might happen in social context, even with the dog. Also risk behaviors, of course, happen in social context. So it might also be really worthwhile looking at the social factors that might undermine maintaining a healthy behavior, or not even initiating a behavior change and all that. So social factors are usually excluded from our health behavior change theory. So this is maybe why I'm so passionate about introducing social context or social factors into health behavior change. And a recent study with very impressive data also demonstrates the importance of social behaviors. There was this is data from the English longitudinal aging study. Participants were all 50 years or older, and in this analysis, only older couples were introduced. So they had altogether 3,772 older couples, representative of England. And what they did was targeting one part of this couple, of this romantic couple, and the health behavior in this person dependent on the health behavior of the other partner. And they focused on smoking, physical inactivity, and overweight. And what they saw, not very surprising, is the very blue, dark blue bars here, is the likelihood of changing these behaviors when the other partner is consistently following the unhealthy behavior across 2 years and 4 years. So these were across 4 years, and this is across 2 years, the overweight. And you see that from men and women quite alike, and also across the different behaviors quite alike, having a partner who is continuously smoking or physically inactive, overweight, doesn't help a lot. It helps a little bit if the partner is consistently, that means across all this time span that was looked at, engaging in a healthy behavior. So not smoking, consistent non-smoker, higher likelihood that the other one will finally stop smoking, consistently physically active, consistently normal weight. So the likelihood is a little bit higher. But, and this is the important part, the likelihood of behavior change is much higher if the other partner is also changing his or her behavior during the same time span. So this is really impressive data, I think, because this really means that doing a behavior change together seems to be really beneficial in also maintaining this behavior change, because this was data across 2 and 4 years. We also have some meta-analytic evidence that indeed for people with at least, or couples with at least one partner being at risk, a couple-focused intervention compared to an individual usual care is more effective in changing the behavior, and the same also applies for people or couples with one partner already having a chronic condition. So getting the partner on board seems to be really effective. However, what we don't know by these meta-analyses, and also not from this wonderful study I just showed you, is why this is the case. So is it because the other is pushing you? Is it because the other is supporting you? Is it because the other one is a role model? Or you're just doing this really together, or whatever? There are many answers to this. I would like to focus on the social support component, because this social support is really prominent in psychology as well. And we do have nice data on the effects of social support. Here's a definition. Social support is an interaction between persons in a problematic situation causing distress, aiming to change, or if this is not possible, at least to ease the coping with this condition. And this might, of course, also apply to a behavior change endeavor, because it might be quite stressful to stop smoking, for example. It's really stressful. Smokers are absolutely stressed when they are smoking. They're very disagreeable, which is also a stress for the partner. So it's quite an interesting context. And social support and health, we also have evidence from a meta-analysis that social support is also very much related to mortality, actually, which was the outcome here in this meta-analysis. You can't read it probably, but this here is smoking less than 15 cigarettes a day, so it's not a pack a day, but it's still regular smoking. And this has the very same effect as low levels of social support on mortality. So this demonstrates very nicely that social support seems to be related to health, comparable effects to smoking. So what we were looking at in one study that I'd like to tell you about is on the dynamics of social support across a quit attempt of couples. These were couples that were both smoking, and we invited them to partake in our study if they wanted to quit jointly. I can tell you, we really had a hard time recruiting couples. Because, I mean, there are quite some couples out there who with both being smokers, but both wanting to quit and partaking in our study. That was really difficult. But we finally recruited 85 smoking couples. We are very proud of these 85 smoking couples. And the idea was really to follow them up via daily diaries, 10 days before their self-set joint quit date, and also 21 days after, in order to see whether, for example, social support from one partner was related to the smoking of the other partner. And just to give you an example how the data looks like, these are really 6 example persons out of these 85 couples. This is the number of cigarettes smoked. The blue line, the green line is the received emotional support. So, for example, being hugged or feeling understanding from your partner that you're going through a rough time stopping smoking. And what you see here, for example, person number 74, the numbers of cigarettes smoked went down, not completely. So this is a common fate in attempted quit attempts, that it's not very often successful. So, but the social support went up, and then obviously this person went back to smoking. The social support stopped, but here the quit attempt finally was successful without the social support playing a role, obviously. So this is a very interesting pattern. And here you also see number 10, which is very interesting. You see that the smoking was high, then it went down really on a little bit after 10, after day number 10, when the quit attempt was. And this person was successfully maintaining the quitting But the social support went up around this quit date and stayed a little bit up, although this person was already not smoking. So you see that there are quite interesting dynamics between these couples or the partners when it comes to the social support and the behavior change. And what we found on this 32-day period was that more support was indeed related to less cigarettes smoked. Of course, these are data on the micro time level. So we focused here on the everyday life across a quit attempt. But I'd always argue if you don't know what happens in people's everyday life, you won't be able to have them maintain their behavior change. So I think this is the very first step, that we need to know what's going on when they stop smoking, start with their physical activity, and so on, in order to know where to intervene upon, for example. So smoking, the evidence on smoking and social support, we run a very similar study actually with the very same design with smoker-non-smoker couples, with the smoking person intending to quit at the self-set quit date. And actually here we found also in lagged effects, which means that we focused on previous day support, predicting next day smoking. We saw that the social support indeed had a lagged effect. So we have hints on this everyday basis that social support might serve a preventive function. That really, if you receive support one day, you are less likely to smoke the next day. So this is quite promising. On the other hand, the evidence from also meta-analysis on intervention effects on smoking, social support in smoking, is rather mixed. However, sometimes these studies, these intervention studies, didn't even mention to increase the level of received social support in the smoker. So there's definitely the need for more research on this. In terms of experimental or intervention evidence and behavior change, I'd like to demonstrate or show you another study that we run in the context of physical activity again, but also focusing on the diets. So we invited diets or couples, romantic couples, to take part in our study. The requirements for both partners were not smoking this time, but they both had to be either overweight or obese, and both of them had to intend to become more physically active. So this was the basic requirement. And then we also randomly allocated them to the intervention group or the control group. And we also had this intensive longitudinal design here that we really wanted to know what's going on in couples' everyday lives. So we were focusing on 28 days. The first 14 days was the intervention phase, and then the next 14 days were the follow-up phase. All participants or participating couples received information on the recommendations of physical activity that you just heard from Katrin de Burg. And the intervention group also had to come up with some goal intentions. So they had to form goal intentions on their physical activity. And then during these first 14 days, so our intervention phase, the control group just received 10 text messages reminding them on completing their end-of-day diary. The intervention group received text messages focusing on the action control. And we split this group to an individual intervention group and a dyadic intervention group. So the individual intervention group received text messages focusing the three components of the action control: awareness of own standards, self-monitoring, regulatory effort, from us as the study team. The dyadic group received the text messages from their partner. And they also, so the partners could could use the very same messages that we had, but they could reformulate this and also the Swiss dialect they spoke, or using nicknames and so on. In this study, we had an objective measurement of physical activity, so no self-report, but with the accelerometer data. And this is an example message for the reminder to complete the end-of-day diary. So what we saw is that indeed this is the intervention group and this is the control group. We found an increased level of exercise in the intervention group. Interestingly or surprisingly for us, there was no difference between the two intervention groups, either having the text messages being sent from the partners or from us as the study team. So they seem to have, so they found us as a study team equally supportive, which is also a good thing, of course. So it doesn't need to be the partner sending the text messages. But so we collapsed the intervention group, and we really saw that across the 28 days, they were better in their physical activity than those who were in the control group. And this is the objectively measured physical activity. How can we explain the difference? So again, this is the question of the mechanisms that might explain this. There were two mechanisms that we were focusing on. So first, the self-reported support they received from their partner, and the action control. So the self-reported action control, which we assessed via the questionnaire in the everyday diaries. And indeed, you see, we did find the intervention effect. So this is a prerequisite for this mediator testing. We also found that the action control intervention compared to the control group increased received social support. So it seemed to be beneficial for the couples dynamics as well. And also the action control that were reported across the 28 days. And received support as well as action control were related to the physical activity objectively measured. So this is, and we also found a significant indirect effect, which is very strong evidence for having these two candidates as a mediator, explaining us why the intervention was effective in comparison to the control group. So, received social support is positively related to health behaviors in couples trying to change the behavior. There's more evidence, which I did not show you in detail here. We also have some experimental evidence, so not only correlational, but we can do causal inferences with these experimental studies that I just showed you, that social support is an important factor in health behavior change in couples. As I showed you, these were really these micro-time assessments. So we need to know more about behavioral maintenance. But one idea that is behind all this couple research is, of course, that really, I mean, with your partner, with your romantic partner, or also maybe with your colleagues, you're almost interacting like every day. So if your partner is not supportive of what you try to change in terms of your health behavior, this might be a maintained negative effect on your health behavior. So this is really important in terms of maintenance. But this needs to be looked at more intensely, of course, in further research. Then also the differences between health behaviors. So maybe it's not so effective in smoking cessation, but more effective in physical activity increase or something. So this is something that we need to do more research about. And then also, because we were focusing on couples, as the romantic partner is usually really the most important person in another person's life, but it might also be likely that different social interaction partners serve different functions. For example, you have a best friend who is your jogging friend, and then you have a friend who is your do not eat so much friend, or whatever. So it might be, or maybe your mother is telling you not to eat so much, or whatever. So the different sources of support might also make a difference, and this is also what needs to be looked at more closely. So to sum up, how can we promote and maintain health behavior change? We need to focus on both individual factors, individual self-regulation, and social factors. When we use individual factors, we should go far beyond risk communication, and we should also go beyond intentions. Strengthen self-regulation, for example, with implying addressing strategies like action, coping planning, and action control. We also need to strengthen resources, for example, self-efficacy. In terms of social factors, we should promote social support. What I did not tell you yet, there are also some downsides of social support. So you need to make sure that it is really responsive to the target person's needs, because otherwise the person might change the behavior but feel really bad while doing so. And then also go beyond social support, so companionship, spending a good and happy time together seems to be an important factor in also in health behavior change, actually. Dyadic coping, so really coping with stressors together, but also social control, for example. So it's not only the friendly, supportive husband, but maybe also the controlling husband. Did you take your medication? I told you to take your medication. This is effective for health behavior change as well. Also has some emotional costs. But it's definitely worth looking at when we want to know and understand better how we can assist individuals or couples in behavior change. And then obviously also the interplay between individual factors and social factors, because they are highly likely to co-occur in real life. This should all promote habit formation. If you remember the 5 themes of maintenance that emerged from the theories, habit was one of them. We have the ultimate goal that we habitually go running, habitually not eat too much sweets, and so on. So this, I think this rather all adds up to promote habit formation. We really should understand everyday processes and the long-term effects, both of them. So this is the conclusion, and I thank you very much for your attention.